January 1st marked the 20th anniversary of the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA became one of the world's largest trading blocs, eliminating almost all tariffs on trade between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Today, free trade is the status quo in North America, and in 2 weeks, the presidents of NAFTA's 3 countries are meeting in Mexico, where they may announce a deepened agreement. Former Mexican ambassador to the U.S., Arturo Sarukhan, joins us to discuss what a new deal might mean for his country. Welcome, Ambassador. We appreciate your presence here on our show.
Great to be with you.
You know, let me start by asking you, how has Mexico benefited from NAFTA?
I think it's been an unmitigated success story, not only for Mexico, I think for the 3 countries. In trade, there are always sectors that win or lose, some more than others. But I think that if you look at NAFTA as a whole, it has lifted boats on both sides of the border. It has created a $1 trillion trade flow between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. It's created a $1 billion a day trade relationship between Mexico and the United States. This whole concern over jobs, well, today, 6 million jobs in 26 different states in the United States directly depend on trade with Mexico. And what's more important, what many people don't seem to get, is that because of NAFTA, we no longer export Mexican products, U.S. products, or Canadian products. We're exporting North American products because our production and supply chains have become fully integrated.
It hasn't been as friendly, though, to the agricultural sector in Mexico. Can you explain why that is?
Well, the agriculture sector in Mexico has been traditionally, especially with small subsistence farmers, a very protected sector. It took a lot of political will, it took a lot of political capital to open up the sector. Obviously, some of these small subsistence farmers have not been able to compete, but more than compete with, say, U.S. growers, the challenge has been within Mexico itself. It's hard to compete with big agribusinesses in Mexico that, because of high technology, high yield investment, irrigation, can compete with some of those smaller producers. So the challenge has been, how do you mitigate that social impact? But it has to do with social policies, not with trade.
You know, Mexico has over a dozen free trade agreements with other countries around the world. So do you think that NAFTA has been a blueprint in helping to make those agreements happen?
There's no doubt in my mind, and I think in the minds of many others, that NAFTA, when NAFTA was signed and enacted in 1990, negotiated in 1993, enacted in 1994, it became the gold standard of all free trade agreements. In many ways, it was the 1.0 of free trade agreements. The international system has changed, the global economy has changed, the free trade agreements that have been signed after NAFTA are probably the 2.0 free trade agreements, and now the 2 most ambitious free trade agreements that are being negotiated, TPP with American Pacific and Asian Pacific nations, and the TTIP with the European Union would be the 3.0 of free trade agreements. I do think that for a country like Mexico, having established that network of free trade agreements was critical to the economic success and the macroeconomic stability that you've seen in Mexico today. I think that it has made Mexico a very important player in building a trade-based, a rules-based trading international system, and I think the same goes for Canada and Mexico. This is why I think that in many ways the TPP could modernize the edifice of NAFTA without having necessarily to renegotiate NAFTA itself, which I think you know well. If we were to open up for negotiation, it would go down in flames because there are constituencies in Canada, Mexico, and the United States that would immediately seek to tack on specific parochial interests. So the great thing about TPP is that it deepens the North American trade architecture, but it also enables the 3 North American countries to enhance their global trade with one of the most dynamic regions in the world.
So the TPP won't diminish NAFTA in your mind as it moves forward?
I think it pulls it up from the bootstraps. I think it modernizes it. It elevates Mexican, Canadian, and U.S. compliance to 21st century standards on the environment, on IPR, on state-owned companies, and it provides a fantastic opportunity to deepen our trade flows with Asia-Pacific economies.
Let's go back to NAFTA for a second, because one critique has been that it really hasn't capitalized on the strength of all three countries because those three countries have pursued separate trade deals with Europe?
Well, I would say, I would put it this way. I think it's a mistake by our American and European friends to proceed in the negotiation of TTIP without taking into account that Mexico, of the three North American countries, is the only one that currently has a free trade agreement with Europe, that our Canadian colleagues are about to finish and sign their agreement with the European Union, and that the end result may be that we have three similar but disparate, separate free trade agreements between Canada, the US, and Mexico, and the European Union. At some point, and I hope it's sooner rather than later, we will have to harmonize these three free trade agreements because if not, key sectors for the European, North American economies, like aerospace and automotive, where European nations, Canada, Mexico, and the United States play a very important role, will suffer. So the challenge is how do we, as quickly as possible, harmonize these three separate treaties that we will have at the end of the day.
All right, Ambassador Sarukhan, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here
pleasure.
on America's Now.
Thank you.